All right, everybody ready to go? All right, here we are. It is April 22nd, 2020. Have the great honor and pleasure of being Athens-Clarke County Mayor Kelly Girtz, a job that grateful to be able to serve in, and grateful to be able to support you, the Athens community, and those beyond us as well. We're going to be coming to you every Wednesday for a series of community conversations through the COVID epidemic. Tonight's will be relatively brief. I have with us Athens-Clarke County Manager Blaine Williams, but in future shows, you're going to see guests who have information about public health, information about small business support, information about individual unemployment needs, information about vulnerable population needs, the Phoenix community, family and children's needs, and other topics. I want to give a great shout out to the Public Information Office staff who've been working overtime in recent weeks, and I think Manager Williams will talk a little bit about their work. And want to let you know that probably by this Friday, I'm going to do on Wednesday, by this Friday, we will know what next week's topic and guests will be. And you can submit any questions or comments or thoughts to ACCGov.com/mayor, where there is a comment button. So if you have other topics that you would like us to speak to, we'd very much like to hear what those are as well. I've mentioned a few just now. We want to bring good information to you. We want to make sure that you are getting the information that benefits your experience here in Athens, particularly in this challenging time. You will not only see some additional guests, but I'm going to be tapping some commissioners to sit in this seat for future shows as well. So you'll see some of them hosting. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we have Athens-Clarke County Manager Blaine Williams with us tonight. Manager Williams, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Thanks for having me.
Glad that you were able to be on. I offered Manager Williams the opportunity to come in his flip-flops. He turned me down, but we're glad to have him here, even in his jacket and tie. Manager Williams, you've been in Athens how long now?
I've been in 7.5 years now.
7.5 years, and this was your second stretch in Athens, is that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I went to graduate school here at university back in the early 90s. Glad to be back in Athens.
Yeah, and we're fortunate to have you, and I know that the people of Athens feel the same. In your professional life, in city and county management and municipal work and private sector work, had you ever seen anything like this?
I never have. This is everything that we've ever dealt with as far as emergencies in local government in Georgia and really across the nation, but particularly in the Southeast, have been weather related. This is a new one.
Yeah, I've shared with a lot of people kind of the same contemplations around my life in this role, that I've considered what tornadoes could look like. We're close enough to the coast that hurricanes sometimes have an impact. We have high-speed directional winds that sometimes have proven challenging for management needs here. But I think for everybody involved, this is a unique experience.
Absolutely.
Kudos to you and the 1,700 strong Athens-Clarke County staff and everybody who's working overtime to help the public out.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got some phenomenal people that work for us.
This is true. We're all fortunate to be part of this organization. So I've asked you to come on tonight just to give the broad sweep overview of what our internal response has been like for our employees and for our core services, because people, of course, wake up every day and they anticipate their trash being collected. They expect the water to come on when they turn the tap on at home. They want to make sure that streets are clean, that police are responsive, that fire services continue to operate. And all of that's true every day, but that continues to be true in the midst of this pandemic. So I appreciate you coming on to just share with the public a little bit of how we're managing to continue operations in the midst of this. And I think I'll probably have some follow-up questions based on what you're going to provide. And then on the back half of the program, you and I are together going to tackle some of the questions that have been sent in to us. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. So I'm going to go ahead and let you pull your presentation up.
All right, excellent. Thanks. Okay, Mayor. Thank you for having me on tonight. And just wanted to talk a little bit about, in your inaugural show, Athens-Clarke County Unified Government response in this unprecedented event. And I do want to just say, Mayor, I appreciate you pointing out about the water coming on and the trash getting picked up. And I think for many, many, many of our citizens, that happens without fail because our employees are dedicated and we really don't operate in crisis mode. But I just want to remind everybody that that when those things happen, it's because somebody's mother, somebody's brother, somebody's sister, a human being is here doing that work, and they're doing it throughout this crisis to make sure that your services go on uninterrupted. And they really are, I think, the unsung heroes of what's going on right now. Well, Mayor, let me start off with a timeline. And there's a lot of words here, but so much has happened in such a short amount of time. It was just the very end of January when that first case was, when we started here. Well, when certain health professionals that listen to this type of thing heard this coming out of China. And then shortly thereafter, it was in February when I think the rest of us started hearing about it. For those of you that live here in Athens-Clarke County, you know that we had spring break early this year. And it was right before spring break when our management team sat down and said, look, this could become something. It's coming our way. And you see the term COOP there at the end. What that stands for is continuous operating plans. And what we try to do is, even if something happens here, how do we continue those services for our for our citizens and residents? And so that planning had started, at least a couple of weeks before things really turned for the worse here. And as you know, things happened very quickly there at the end of that first week of spring break. And I remember it clearly. It was literally one evening where it went from, we're still wondering if tomorrow, if things are going to be normal, to no, this is very different. And that series of events really started around March 13th. I want to applaud our mayor and commission. Even during all of this, there was a lot of conversations between the elected officials on what this response should look like. And I think everybody saw on March 16th where the first local state of emergency was established. And really, I think the intent, Mayor, was to go ahead and make that a shelter in place, which that was done on the 19th, so not long thereafter. And we were one of the first in the state to do that, the mayor and commission. And, I just want everybody to go back to that date when we really didn't understand what it was we were about to get involved in here. And I do think there was a certain measure of courage that was taken to be one of the first in the state to do this. And I can tell you too, Mayor, that I'm involved in my state association with managers, and I've been in contact with many of them across the state. And there are many cities that used ours as a model because they were waiting to see. We'd never dealt with anything like this before. That was only a month ago when that happened, and it seems like a whole lifetime ago. And of course, all of you at home have been keeping up with all of this on almost a painfully day-by-day basis as things unfold. But in March 23rd, Governor Kemp issued a shelter-in-place ordinance, which, I think a good thing about that shelter-in-place ordinance is it brought some uniformity across the state. And, there's been a lot of discussion here in our region. There's 17 counties that funnel to our hospitals here in Athens. And what you had is a whole variety of responses from those counties. So there wasn't anything uniform about that. Now, the fact that Athens took a very proactive approach to this, of course, the governor's order was less restrictive than what we had here. But I think the mayor and commission have continued to exhort, even as of last night, that we should continue this shelter in place based on the science and the what we're getting from state and federal authorities. So
that's right. Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that 17 county region, because I think sometimes people think of us in isolation and think of these jurisdictional boundaries as having meaning, and they do in some sense, in that, if you live in one spot on Highway 72, you pay taxes in Clarke County, and just a quarter mile up the road, you may pay taxes in Madison County. But ultimately, while we're a political subdivision of 130,000, there's this 750,000 strong population who get their primary care in many ways from our two hospitals in the local network. And one of the things that those hospital chiefs have mentioned is just, how these outlying smaller hospitals don't have the ICU capacity to provide for the local population in Greensboro or in Elberton or in Commerce. And those services are offered here. So we're serving this much broader area.
Well, and one thing for sure, we're all in this together. So let me move on. And again, I'm just kind of recapturing what many people have read in the media, but there are some pretty critical ways to deal with this crisis, and that's having adequate testing capacity, robust contact tracing, modifying behavior, and having the healthcare capability. And I will say, as a local government, and I know, Mayor, you intend to talk about this more, I would just say that, you have to understand what is within our sphere of control from the get-go. And certainly the Mayor and Commission enacted legislation that sought to alter the behavior of our citizens in the interest of their safety. And we've been coordinating very closely with our healthcare providers, and they have been taking prudent steps. And we feel really good about the work that both of our hospitals have done, as well as public health. So I think just on the horizon, and I'm personally someone who is paying very close attention to a risk of resurgence later this year, and we'll be planning accordingly. But I think building that testing capacity and contact tracing infrastructure is something that I know the epidemiologists that we've been consulting have told us is very important. And so we're all kind of holding on for the future vaccine that will be developed, but I think everybody's read the same thing I've read in the media. That's probably 12 to 18 months away. So the mayor did distinguish that we are in an emergency, and normally with the weather and the things that the mayor named, it's a pretty brief and violent event, and we get to work cleaning up, and then we get back to our lives. And that just isn't the case with the nature of this emergency. So there is there is a national model called the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, and our folks are trained in that. And J.W. Thaxton, and you can see his name up there in the top and next to mine. He's a captain in our fire department, but he's also our emergency management coordinator. And in times of emergency, he becomes one of the leading people in the organization. And so accordingly, we work very closely together. We restructured our reporting to three main branches: operations, administration, and communications. You can see the folks there that are heading those up. And then we are bringing specific focus to in the operations, vulnerable populations and nonprofit support. And the mayor will be talking more about that in the future. Business and workforce support. We talk about logistics. We're helping Department of Public Health, bringing supplies into the community and storing them. And then our project planning, trying to help plan how to deploy resources into the community. And you can see some of the other things that we have going on, and both the administration branch, communications branch has both been very busy. I know communications, it's just been a constant flurry of motion in trying to get information into the community as much as possible to try and convey what safe behavior looks like, and doing that in different languages so that all of our citizens understand how to be as safe as they can. So just very briefly on employee support. And so interestingly enough, and Mayor, I'm going to give you credit for this. What I really enjoy about working with the local government and the people that we work with is a very innovative spirit here. And you had shared with me that your wife works pretty high up in a local national food provider, and you had mentioned the idea of rotating teams, and that just had stuck in the back of my mind. And that was something that our management team talked about early on. And interestingly enough, the mayor and I both were on a call with local industry, and they had employed the same tactic. And so separately, we all sort of arrived at the same thing. And the point is this: to thin out the number of people in the workplace, and then create separate teams that come in separate from each other in case any one of those teams, somebody gets sick and perhaps the others have been exposed to it. And I just want to really bring this into focus for the listeners today. We can't afford for your water not to come on, not in this public health emergency. So we have to have trained employees that are going to work and making sure that the water that you need comes on demand, and it's in a safe form when it gets there. And so throughout the government, whether it was the planning department or public utilities, we've broken into teams, and we're rotating folks in and out. We're making sure, and as y'all know, there's a number of departments here that they're not taking days at home. I mean, they're our first responders, our police, our fire, our corrections officials, the sheriff's department, public utilities, and solid waste. A number of these departments are 24/7. Our transit, providing transit is very important for folks that still need to get to work and get to the grocery store. And so these folks have not missed a beat during all of this, and they have families like the rest of us. And we've tried to have personal protective equipment set aside for them. We are not unlike anybody else. We had some we'd planned ahead for, but not quite for this length. And so we're still working through that. I mentioned the continuity of operations plans earlier, and we continue to refine those as we all learn that I think we're settling in for the long haul here. I know the governor has signaled some lifting of restrictions, and we're hopeful that the cases will continue to go down. We're again still looking at national and state data. We're looking for that 14 days of declining cases, and we're going to plan ahead for when science tells us that it's safe to be back out there, or at least to get back into the full swing of things.
Blaine, as county manager, is there some class of employees for whom you're sort of critically conscious of their challenges as they come into contact with the broader public?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, we've all learned a lot about this virus in a short amount of time, and while it did seem to target certain individuals, it does, particularly those folks over 60 years old, those that have existing conditions that make them more vulnerable to it. We have to be very respectful of people's medical privacy, but we have tried to inquire to find out which of our patients might be which of our employees might be at risk, of the virus, and we are working with them through our department directors and to try to modify, have them telework if possible. And I said this early on. I think we're looking at 3 to 4 to 6 months. We got to make sure that we are going to have people exposed, and we are going to have positive cases, and we're going to have people quarantined. But we've got to be able to have enough people to keep the services going while those folks recover. And so, yes, we are paying attention to our employees' needs, Mayor.
Great.
And with that, with the leave considerations, that really factors into that. Not everybody can telework from home, and I will say that we've taken some extraordinary steps so that our folks can get back out into the field and do work for those that can't do teleworking. For those folks that can do some at home but not a full 40 hours, we have come up with other opportunities for them to fill their time. this is important that we support our employees during this time. If we're in rotational crews and you're off rotation, it's not your fault that you can't make it into work. And so we're trying to find that person ways to make sure that their time is fully taken care of. And so we're working through that. We're 5 weeks into this, and we're trying to be thoughtful about our employees. Let me just run very quickly through several of our departments, and all of our departments are working in some form or fashion. Some of these are topical and timely for you. And so for the elections office, as many folks know, the general primary election was delayed until June 9th. And so you may have received in the mail the absentee ballot request from, and we would urge you to use that. That's the safest way to get your vote cast, and it is recommended by the Secretary of State. So you can expect to begin receiving these absentee ballots this week, starting Saturday. We are setting up drop boxes. The first one was installed at the Board of Education's office. If you don't want to mail it, you want to make sure that it's going to get received, then you can drop it in the drop box. Advanced voting in person does begin on Monday, May 18th at the Board of Elections office. And then just a reminder for everyone, if you want to vote in this upcoming election, the registration deadline is May 11th.
And Manager Williams, on the kind of drop-off opportunity, do we anticipate deploying some other boxes throughout the community in the weeks ahead?
That's the plan. And Mayor, I haven't seen what those locations are, but I do intend to follow up on that.
Great.
Well, the Building Inspection and Planning Department. So, and many of you that are driving around, you see some work still going on some major construction sites, and those contractors are responsible for their workers. We recognize that trying to keep development going on is important to the economy, and I think the Mayor and Commission, it's definitely safety first. But where we can be safe to continue things that allow people to work and earn money, we want to continue to do that. There has been a reduction in the issuances of permits and applications, but our inspectors and permit technicians have not missed a beat, and this has gone on without interruption. Some are working remotely from home and using iPads for their work. In conjunction with the planning department, we have been talking for some years about moving to fully electronic plans submission, and we're in the cusp of selecting a new vendor to do that. But our existing vendor has allowed us to go ahead and do that, and we beta tested with some local firms on that. So it is currently possible for you to submit plans for development and plans review online. And that's going to save a lot of money for the folks that had to previously print reams of plans for us in paper, and not to mention that it's good for the environment as well.
You're saving many trees.
Yes, sir. And so, our building inspection folks are staying in close communication with area stakeholders as well. Planning, we'll have the first Planning Commission meeting since the beginning of the crisis on May 7th. And we are taking special steps. We want citizens to be able to voice any concerns or support that they have for any projects that may be coming forward. We need to do all this in a safe manner. And so the planning department and the public information office are working very closely to give people the opportunity to either express their thoughts, whether it's online, or by phone or other means, or if they want to come in person, then we're going to have a way for folks to be able to share their thoughts. Leisure Services Department, and I know this one's near and dear to everyone's heart. This crisis has struck on probably one of the most beautiful springs that I can remember, and the nature of it is everybody wants to get outside. And we really struggled with the idea of closing parks, but for a lot of the amenities that are offered in our larger parks, they do invite people to be in close proximity with one another. An exception for that would be the Greenway and Firefly trails, very linear in nature, and if folks are using them the way they're meant to be used and they're moving along them and not stopping and congregating. Bishop Park, for instance, is also part of that network and is open as well. So the whole idea of having people congregating closely has necessarily caused us to rethink our summer camps, and we know how valuable they are to our citizens, and it really pained our leisure services staff to do this, but we did cancel them for June. But we are aiming for July, and I say that, and a lot of folks key off of that as something written in stone, but it's not. We're watching this unfold, and I think the mayor and commission, I know the mayor and commission have extended the shelter in place that they would like to see through June the 2nd. And it's sort of a, let's see where we are as we get closer to that date, and then we'll reassess what we need to do. We are reviewing plans to tier the reopening of parks when it is safe. And what I mean by that is, Sandy Creek Park might be one of the first parks to open because of the nature of its openness. Those with the basketball courts and the tennis courts and the pickleball courts, those are things that really invite people to be in close proximity with one another. Those will probably be a little bit later in the opening. The Linden House Center has been a center for, we have 1,700 employees. We have many first responders. We had a need to make our own protective mask, and we didn't want to take away from the supplies from the community. We did not want to take some of the great work citizens are doing for our healthcare providers. And so our employees have stepped up and are working on making about 3,000 masks so that every one of our employees can have at least 2 masks. And I think they're getting close to working on the first 650 right now.
Yeah, and it was interesting you mentioned Sandy Creek Park, because that, like so many of our parks, is sort of multifunctional. You have ball fields there, you have jungle gyms, you have a large pavilion, you have a beach, and you have some trails. And a lot of the conversations I've had with community members have been around requests from community members to be able to open up some of those great trails that I've enjoyed hiking again and again over there. And I know from a management perspective, it's hard to open up only a component of a park without opening up the whole thing.
Well, they are talking about when's the best time to do that and how we go about doing that. So more plans to come on that. With Public Works, there's a lot of routine maintenance that I think people, they may notice that pothole out there, but they may not notice some of the stormwater clearing that's going on. But all of that has continued. We do have a number of planned projects, whether they're sidewalks, multipath, streets and bridges. Bishop Park there's an in-house crew over there building a sidewalk. There's a new sidewalk going in at Barnett Shoals near Carriage Lane. Some of you over in 5 Points may have noticed the traffic signal modifications at Southview and Baxter Street. We're in the process of procuring a qualified contractor to replace the Tallahassee Road Bridge over the CSX Railroad. That's a T-SPLOS project that we moved along. The North Chase Street sidewalk's underway. We're acquiring easements for Magnolia Street and Holman Drive. There's pedestrian improvements on Jefferson River Road and Cherokee Road. They're planned to be presented to the public for review and comment. There's just a number of things here. The mayor and commission are considering approving a contractor bid now to repave 100 of our roads in the worst condition this summer. And that's a combination of taxpayer dollars, T-SPLOS dollars, and state aid as well. Stormwater, we have a number of both planned and emergency stormwater projects. The one that's planned that's of note, I think, for everyone, and I think really speaks to our staff, how dedicated they are and how they want to not impact any of our citizens negatively in the building of these projects. But there's a lot of work if you're in and around downtown going on Clayton Street and replacing, 100-year-old, or there was no stormwater system to speak of down there. And they have been installing those pipes while the businesses are shut down, and they should be done by May 1st. What happens after that? The contractor will come on board. There are a number of underground utility vaults, and what I mean by that, they're transformers that are underground in these big vaults. And the grade of the sidewalk and the street is not going to change appreciably, but it will change some. And so the lids of those vaults have to be adjusted. And so contractors going to have to work with Georgia Power as they do the streetscape, making sure all that comes online. But we hope that work will start in mid-May, and that will continue through next year. Mayor, I won't go through too many more of these, but just from an emergency stormwater standpoint, and we've talked about this with the mayor and commission, there's a lot of hills in Athens-Clarke County, and we all know water runs downhill. And anytime you have if you're driving on a road, I just ask you to notice where the water goes every once in a while, and it usually goes under the road. And what you're driving over is a pipe that allows that water to transit under the road and go to the other side. And in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of pipe put in across Athens-Clarke County, either publicly or privately, that was made of a corrugated metal. And it's near the end of its life cycle, and some of those are failing. And our last work session, we had some pictures of that. But let me just, on Hemlock Drive, we have a failed pipe that needs to be taken care of. Beaver Ridge Drive, we've had a pipe failure there. Olympic Drive, Charlie Bolton Drive, Seagraves and Lavender Road. Athena Drive is shut down right now. And so there's a number of these emergency stormwater pipe replacements that are having to be replaced right now. And there'll be more discussion with the mayor and commission about what that looks like. Mayor, I know you really wanted me to talk a little bit about solid waste as well. And with the collections, I want to point out one thing. The leaf and limb crews got behind. They should be caught up this week. What we did note is many cities across Georgia and the U.S. have had to cancel their leaf and limb collections and their recycling. But we are really proud that we've been running all collections safely and on a fairly regular schedule. There were some questions about the landfill registration process, and we have started asking folks to register out there and with their water bill. And the reason we did this, and we've all done it, Mayor, I've done it, this time that you have at home and you really can't go out and do things on the weekends like you did before, well, you clean up. And so we had a 10 to 15 increase in incoming traffic by residential customers coming to the landfill in the wake of the crisis. And it was doubling our cash intake, and it was putting a lot of pressure on staff around if you go out there, our red building. And so with the new system, they wanted to achieve two goals. And one is to spread the flow of customers so we don't have any one time around the red building, and to eliminate the cash transactions until more data comes out about the virus transmission on cash. And they wanted to do all of this while still accepting residential customers. There have been some landfills and transfer stations who have eliminated residential customers altogether when there's safer hauling methods available to all, like there are in ACC. But we did put a system in place that allows for non-essential and essential landfill trips through the registration process. And I know that is different for you as our citizens, but I hope that you see why we're doing it and that we're still trying to provide the service, and we really appreciate your patience with that. So finally, I just wanted to share with you what's going on with our Economic Development Department. And I know this is near and dear to the Mayor and Commission to support our small local businesses and make sure that they can make it through these times. Great partnership between the Chamber, the Small Business Development Center at the university, the Downtown Development Authority, and two local firms here of attorneys to have a hotline where businesses can send in their email questions, and there are an army of folks here ready and willing to answer your questions about some of the issues that are going on. So I advise everybody to take advantage of that. We do have a list as the government of everybody that pays the occupation tax, or what some folks refer to as a business license, and we've been sending out communications to them. The mayor will be talking more about the revolving loan fund in the days to come. And there's just a lot of great, the chamber's been hosting calls that, Mayor, I know you've been on and I've been on with different folks. And I know that our businesses are hurting right now, but I do like the spirit that I'm seeing of folks coming together and trying to provide hope. And so those are just some of the highlights, Mayor, I wanted to share with some of our departments. There's a lot of great work going on in departments I didn't even mention.
Great. Thank you, Manager Williams. I noted in one of the slides, I don't think you hit this point, but the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials is going to open on the 29th. I'm very happy about that, not only because it's very close to my home over there on College Avenue by the river and MLK, but at least somebody in my home is getting through this crisis via retail therapy. And so there's a lot of styrofoam that's now in the backseat of my car. So I'll be glad that I can bring that over there Wednesday, April 29th from 10 to 5.
Well, I did not mean to gloss over that. Let me also tell you that it's a slow reopen. So we're urging folks to go to the website and register for that, because we our staff, they want to be careful, and we understand that folks have been cleaning up, and there's a lot of stuff probably out there that needs to come. And so please register in advance on that, and go back to the website to see what the future dates would be as well.
Great. All right. Well, Manager Williams, I appreciate you bringing that overview of local government operations here so everybody understands all the work that's gone into just kind of maintaining what we're doing and making sure we're doing that safely, because we want to make sure our employees are well protected and well cared for. Many employees have sent me great notes of gratitude about the support they've received here, and lots of residents have sent notes of gratitude too about how services have continued uninterrupted. So I'm grateful for that. We're going to move into the last segment of the show where we've got questions to respond to. And some of these sort of thematically fit in buckets. So I'm going to try and sort of note the theme and then sort of give a general response. And I'll begin with a set of questions that I've received about the governor's announcement as of Monday that there's going to be certainly faster than I'd anticipated, structured reopening of some Georgia businesses. The notice that we already have received is that this Friday on the 24th, hair salons and nail salons, shop massage parlors, tattoo studios, and bowling alleys are going to be reopening. And so several folks have noted that they're concerned about this. They don't see this as sufficient leadership. They're wondering if there's anything that we can do to push back against this and send a different message, a message that reflects what was earlier mentioned in terms of healthcare knowledge around needing to see a couple of consecutive weeks of declining new cases before we opened. And so I do want to note that last night at our agenda setting meeting, we had a short special called session to vote on several items. And one of those was a resolution by the full commission and myself recognizing that we should continue to shelter in place because we don't have the healthcare indicators and we don't have the widespread nature of testing that we need. One writer asks, is there some way we can bring legal challenge? And certainly, it's always possible for a local government to bring legal challenge against state. We believe that we're best positioned just by maintaining the stance that we've had here in Athens and by encouraging all the great citizens, all the great residents of Athens-Clarke County to maintain the position that they've had too, which is to say, you've been careful. I've seen people with masks on, but I have been on the Greenway and I've been there often with my family. People have been practicing distancing in a careful way. We know that's not uniformly true. It's not 100% true. But we want you to continue to be the messengers to your neighbors, your friends, your business associates, and others. I do believe it's premature to kind of open any businesses either this Friday or what's been telegraphed for a further opening of some other spaces next week. And I've gotten note after note from hair salon owners and restaurateurs who say they're going to continue in the shelter-in-place mode or the very limited delivery and curbside pickup kind of mode. A couple questions about what our tax structure might be in the coming year. Certainly, as everybody is hurting, they're wondering, can local government share in the responsibility and kind of act in concert with us? And so one specific question from April in Athens is, what's being done to roll back or freeze property taxes for low-income workers, given that wages have been stagnant for many members of our community? So we, even prior to this, asked our local delegation of the General Assembly, our 2 state senators and our 3 state representatives, to carry through the General Assembly a new homestead exemption that would specifically target those lower income members of our community so that their tax burden would freeze on a year in, year out basis. Long promoted that idea. The commission unanimously requested that the General Assembly delegation carry that to Atlanta. We don't know exactly what the rest of this General Assembly session is going to look like when they come back online. The indication that we've received is that they're going to come back at some point, and the Lieutenant Governor, who presides over the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, presiding over the House of Representatives in Atlanta, are in discussions now about that. I would encourage all members of the public to let your state representatives and state senators know that you support this increased local homestead exemption option that has to be approved first on the state level and then can be approved by voters here in Athens. And that's what we intend to do, is have this go in front of voters in November so that you can see some reduction in responsibility. A similar question comes from Dave in Athens, and appreciate his thanks for the work we've done here. He asks about the prospect of large millage rate reduction this year to assist small businesses and landlords. I'll say I've spent many hours this week and last week and even prior to the crisis beginning to assemble a budget. Our budget needs are something of a moving target. We essentially are preparing for at least a couple of tracks. One track of which is that campus operations resume at the University of Georgia in the fall, and another track may be that they don't resume in a full bore way until January or some future date. As I survey what's going on around the country with universities from Arkansas to Pittsburgh to Boston, there are a lot of universities that are openly contemplating some modified schedule for the coming year, and that's going to have a budgetary impact. Simultaneous with that, there's conversation in Washington, D.C. through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and through the National Association of County Officials for some stimulus for local governments. So those are going to play into exactly what our budgetary needs look like and exactly what we can do with any relief via the millage rate. I'll say broadly, and this is typical in a local government our size, more than 60% of our annual general fund expenditures are around public safety in the court system, so fire, police, jail, and the courts. And so while some prospect of a reduction exists, we have some limiting factors there in terms of providing minimum basic operational needs. I'm also looking at fee structures. There have been a lot of questions about what the alcohol licensing fee may look like, and I expect some relief there in a structured way of providing either for those low size operations and providing some relief also based on the reality that restaurants and pubs weren't able to operate in at least the last third of this fiscal year, basically from spring break onward. So I want to let everybody know that the work on that continues. I wish I could give you more detail, but we're playing with some of these variables around some other things. There's a question from Lindy here in Athens. What would the impact be of students coming back in the fall on a surge of new cases? And it means a surge of new infections. And you saw in the manager's presentation earlier that there is this concern about a second wave of infections. And so public health experts, we in the government who've assembled a team of epidemiological support providers are looking very much at that. What can we do collectively to make sure that if we have a second wave, and health experts agree that there's going to be some measure of second wave, how that can be as reduced as possible. And so I think from our end, at least as a recommending body, that would be some structured phase-in in activities where there's high contact things are the least likely to happen things. I'll say, as a guy who loves live music and who decided where he was going to apply to graduate schools based on cities that had great music scenes, I want nothing more than to walk on the sticky floor of the 40 Watt Club and be with 500 people enjoying some live music. But I know that can't happen in the near term, and similarly, large gatherings for academic purposes or leisure purposes otherwise can't happen yet. So we're not recommending those in the same way that we've at least put a halt to our summer camps through the end of June, and we're monitoring what goes on beyond that. We've got a question from Carter here in Athens about the prospect of some different kinds of monitoring. We've heard about temperature monitoring, but he notes that some of the health experts have said that one of the sort of silent components of COVID-19 is that there's a real reduction in airflow through people's lungs. And so there is now some ramping up of testing opportunities around what's people's lung capacity and oxygen level. Have we looked at that? And I'll share with Carter, I'd heard some of this scientifically in prospect. We have not looked at that in terms of a way to monitor either our employees or members of the public. But I appreciate you bringing that to our attention as something to monitor. Andrew Williams and myself are in contact with lots of professional organizations, both in the state and around the country, to try and implement best practices. And so I think we'll be looking to all those organizations to ramp those innovative ideas in as quickly as we possibly can. Manager Williams, one of the things that we're getting lots of questions about is about what's going to be the impact of some partial reopening or very limited reopening on Department of Labor claims, because generally speaking, partial unemployment is being filed by employers on behalf of their employees. And right now, at least, they have to indicate that employees have accepted all work made available to them, and that when the crisis returns, the expectation is that employees return to work. And so I guess the question is sort of multifold. Has the crisis ended? And certainly it's true that there is a continued local crisis that's declared, state crisis that's declared, and a national crisis that's declared. And so I know you've been in contact with the Department of Labor, and maybe you could share a little bit about what you learned.
Okay. Well, as far as when the crisis is over, I'm not sure that we have an answer for that. I did want to share, and if I might, Mayor, real quick, screen. So just so folks know, there are some COVID-19 specific rules for unemployment eligibility. So if there are certain individuals that are unable to work, but may have an expectation of returning to work when the emergency ceases, they shall be considered involuntarily employed through no fault of their own. And this applies to all claims filed on or after March 14th. And this would include but not be limited to the following categories. And I went ahead and typed these out, and I put the code section up there so folks could find it. But if you're eligible for this COVID-19 unemployment, if you're quarantined on the advice of a licensed medical professional, you're 60 or more years of age, you've got to recognize medical condition and making you more susceptible. If you're a caregiver or reside with someone identified in B and C above right there, or if you're a custodial parent or legal guardian of a minor whose school is closed due to COVID-19, is unable to secure childcare. And, and of course, for that last, that begs the question, well, what will happen with the schools? And we're still waiting to find out about that. Another one of the questions, Mayor, I think you received was had to do with, just turn that off there. Had to do with, well, what if an employee doesn't feel safe returning to work? And, of course, everyone's encouraging employees to return and work with your employer to make sure that there are safe practices being followed in your workplace. But if you make the decision that it's just not safe for you and you decide to separate, you do have a right to file an individual claim, and the eligibility determination will be made based on the facts presented in the case. So if you don't feel safe in your workplace, document why that is, and then you can share your story with the Department of Labor, and they'll make a finding on that. One question was, well, what if an employee's making more money on unemployment and doesn't want to return to work? And employers can continue to file claims on behalf of the employees reporting any wages they're making. And I think this was an exception with this was an emergency rule that was made on March the 26th, where you can actually make up to $300 per week without negatively impacting your maximum benefit amount for the week. And so that would allow employees to work reduced hours, but still qualify for those state unemployment benefits. And I know there's a lot of questions, Mayor, and that might be something for your future show, having a labor expert come and share some of those benefit issues.
That's what I anticipate in one of the next couple of shows, is inviting somebody from the Georgia Department of Labor and then some other support providers for employees' needs, because this is obviously evolving, and I wish we had very clear answers for everybody, but I appreciate you interacting with the Department of Labor. Before we go tonight, just a couple more quick questions. Alicia in Athens asks, will citations be issued after some non-essential businesses and social clubs are allowed to open? And how will the city handle the shelter-in-place or curfew starting Monday with more businesses open? And I'll share that enforcement has been sort of multi-tiered during this period. The formal enforcement mechanism are state authorities. In local government terms, the only citation providers that are permitted under the governor's order are sheriff's department. Our code enforcement folks and our police officers have been providing guidance, which was essentially their stance when we had a local order in place, that there had been a couple of warnings issued. But I think we will continue to provide guidance rather than have any new citation opportunity as a local government. And then last question of the night, somebody writes, I appreciate hearing about the mobile COVID-19 testing lab for our vulnerable populations. And for those who haven't heard, we have been able to interact with the Augusta University of Georgia Health Science Campus, and facilitated through GEMA, Georgia Emergency Management. We now have a mobile lab on the streets. Credit to Dr. Susan Lester, who's helped this from the medical campus end. And the writer asks, how will this be rolled out? Will it go to certain neighborhoods on certain dates, or will they go directly to people's homes? And so what we understand is that they are going directly to some individuals' homes. There's a number on our website. If you go to ACCGov.com/coronavirus, you can find full information about the mobile lab. You can call 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and the mobile lab will visit you. And then as their work evolves, they will be stopping in certain neighborhoods where there are high needs on certain days. And I've just gotten some great numbers today that yesterday they conducted 38 tests via that mobile clinic and 47 tests today. So kudos to our partners out there. So we're going to close out for the night. I thank everybody for joining us tonight. As with all our programming, this will be archived on our YouTube channel at ACCGov.com. If you have ideas for future shows, or if you'd like to ask questions, again, if you go to ACCGov.com/mayor, there's a link there where you can file your question. By this Friday, the 24th, we'll know our guests for next Wednesday and the 29th. And so we'll be letting you know that information. Everybody stay safe. Thanks for working in such a unified, concerted way here in Athens. You guys are great. We wish you the very best. We'll be coming to you soon.